Dear viewers across the world, most welcome to my channel NAGA World Conflict Zone. Israel and Palestine. Palestine should not be denied legitimate representation. Palestinians have extraordinarily little say over their own affairs. Most are in exile, more than 5 million are refugees, and about 5 million live under military occupations. It is therefore tough for many to swallow that all three Palestine elections scheduled for 2021 for the Legislative Council, the Presidency and Palestine National Council have been postponed indefinitely. At best, the Palestinian Authority is no more than an enfeebled, aid-dependent entity with a highly limited quasi-municipal authority. Palestinians would, in theory, only be able to elect a Palestinian president who cannot leave Ramallah unless soldiers at an Israeli checkpoint let him through. Only in March, Israel confiscated the travel pass of the Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki just because he had the temerity to go to The Hague to visit the International Criminal Court. He shrugged it off when I asked him about it. They confiscated my pass, so I had to go through intrusive Israeli searches, which I had to do all my life before becoming foreign minister, he said. Which other foreign minister in the world has his pass confiscated and has to submit to full body searches? The Israeli authorities did everything they could to thwart these elections. They refused to allow any electoral activity in East Jerusalem and even arrested Palestinian candidates for daring to hold a press conference. If anyone had any doubt about the power relationships between Israel and the Palestine Authority, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dispatched the head of Shin Bet to meet President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah in March. He reportedly demanded that the elections be cancelled. The Israeli government feared that elections would allow Hamas to become the largest party in the Palestine Legislative Councils. The approach merely demonstrated the colonial attitude of the occupying power. Palestinians may be allowed to vote, but only where and when the occupier permits, and only if they vote the right way. The colonial approach raises a significant questions. Given Israel's almost complete control over the occupied territories, what is the point of having Palestine elections? Critics are also right to point out that delaying the elections suit Abbas and Fatah. Last week's move was self-serving and widely interpreted as an attempt to hold on the little power they had. With these, Abbas and Netanyahu share at least one thing in common: a dogged determination to remain in office. As in 2006, Fatah is massively divided. This time, the party had three competing lists running for the Legislative council, and even competing candidates for the presidential elections, which was scheduled for July. Marwan Barghouti was strongly rumored to be considering running against Abbas, even as he remains in an Israel jail. Polls indicated he would win handsomely. The postponement harms the Palestine national movement and, despite its leader protest, will not necessarily displease Hamas, which can continue to act as the warden of the prison that is Gaza. The renewal of the Palestinian leadership is an integral part of ensuring legitimacy and effectiveness. It has been 15 years since the last legislative elections, and Abbas just started 17th year of his 4 terms. The US and European government were quick to voice their criticism. The European Union described the decision as deeply disappointing and said a new date for election should be set without delay. We reiterated our call on Israel to facilitate the holding of such elections, including in East Jerusalem. The US administration, however, refrained from even mild criticism of Israel's blocking of the elections in East Jerusalem. Criticisms from many Western governments ring rather hollow. Where this champion of the Palestinian democracy in 2006, when they refused to accept the verdict of the Palestinian electorate after Hamas had won. Notably, none stated unequivocally that they would accept the result of 2021 vote. There are many valid reasons not to approve of Hamas, including its attacks on civilians and its regressive politics, but democracy is about respecting the result. The US government also made it clear that it opposed any candidate who did not recognize the state of Israel or who supported terrorist activities. Imagine if the US government had opposed Israel candidates in Israeli elections who opposed a Palestinian state or who backed war crimes, including settlements building. Moreover, when the Israeli government refused to budge on allowing Palestinians to vote in East Jerusalem, what did the US and European governments do? Well, they issued more statements to add to the mountain already issued expressing concern about Israeli actions. Israeli government had ignored each and every one of these statements for decades. So it was no surprise that the Netanyahu government did not shift. The reality is that European government in the particular know perfectly well that only real and sustained pressure has a chance of working with Israel. There have been thousands of condemnations of Israeli settlements building, but never any consequences. This means that European governments are in reality quite content with settlement, home demolitions, and Palestinians being denied their freedom. Put another way, if the European Union said that its partnership with Israel would be suspended if Palestine's elections were not permitted, it would shatter the complacency in the Israeli corridor of power. However, the European Union is right to call for new election dates. This should be a very brief postponement, though it is hard not to see it as an out and out cancellations. To thought that concerted effort, including pressure on Israel, must be made to ensure that Palestine in East Jerusalem will be allowed to participate fully in this exercise. A failure to allow this must finally trigger hard consequences. Palestine's politics have always been vibrant, if sadly in recent times bitterly polarized. In all, 93% of eligible Palestinians registered to vote. But Palestinians need to space and the avenues to debate their future as part of the process of their liberations and self-determinations. Right now, with the prospect of negotiations so slim and the occupations at full throttle, a reinvigorated strategy is crucial. Israeli leaders, not least Netanyahu, have released the Palestine political divisions and done everything to encourage them, knowing full well this weakens their hand. What would truly scare the Israeli leaderships would be a Palestine counterpart with a full and legitimate political mandate to demand its people's national and individual rights. This should not be postponed. Above all, proper, fair, and full Palestine elections are a Palestinian requirement and aspirations that should be realized immediately without obstacles and or interference. Chris Doyle is director of the London-based Council for Arab-British Understanding.